In his recent book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about how 80% of the matter in our universe is dark matter. 80%. That number is incredible because dark matter is matter that we can't see. We can't even measure it directly. The only reason why we know it's there is because we can measure its gravitational impact on other objects in the universe. It's a pull so powerful that objects are thought to be held rigidly in orbit by dark matter, even though the laws of Newtonian relativity would predict that they should burst apart. Now, all of that is fascinating, but what's even more fascinating to me is that it's a beautiful analog for the way that our minds work. Research in the field of psychology tells us that upwards of 80% of the thoughts that we have in a day are subconscious thoughts. These thoughts are adaptations, they're shortcuts. They're our mind's best attempt at simplifying a very complex world. And they happen completely outside of our awareness. They're mental dark matter. Don't believe me? How about this? Have you ever gotten a new job or moved to a new home, and maybe 2 weeks later, you're in your car and you're driving, and you realize you're driving to your old house or your old job? What causes that? It's mental dark matter. It's the habitual thought process that you developed by driving the same route over and over again. And it's powerful enough that it caused you to drive a motor vehicle without even realizing it. Now, all of this is incredibly interesting to me because I'm a social cognitive psychologist. Now, I'm not the kind of psychologist who can help you interpret your dreams. I don't have a comfortable couch in my office, but rather, I'm the kind of psychologist who is fascinated by the way that we encode and store and use information. That's the cognitive part. And it's information about people and social settings and their lives. That's the social part. Bottom line, I'm fascinated by mental dark matter and the way that it influences people and the lives they lead. And in a moment, you will be too. Now, before we get to the part where I convince you of that, let's make sure we're all working with some really good definitions. The thing is, when I say the word subconscious, what typically pops into people's minds are images of Sigmund Freud or maybe something mystical like a psychic. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the old, adaptive part of your mind that's on constant watch every waking moment of the day for patterns and co-occurrences of information that just look like they go together. And it uses these patterns to construct a set of mental heuristics or shortcuts. These shortcuts help our mind simplify a very complex world, and they reduce the number of decisions that we have to consciously make in a day. In a lot of ways, it's very adaptive. And it happens completely outside of our awareness. It's mental dark matter. So how does it form? The most common way is through pervasive patterns, subtle but consistent co-occurrences of information that we just encounter throughout our lives. This could be from society or our parents or the media or other experiences. This is why simply smelling the cologne or the perfume of someone you dated in the past is enough to bring up strong feelings even years later. And over time, our subconscious mind, our mental dark matter, constructs a body of knowledge about everything and everyone we've ever encountered in our lives. But for the purposes of today's talk, the most important part of that dark matter is the part that learned about you. The set of patterns and general assumptions and rules about who you are and what people like you do and don't do, and what people like you can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do. Our subconscious mind, our mental dark matter, it serves these assumptions up to us in the form of conscious thoughts that we're aware of and emotions that we can feel. These are the gravitational forces that hold you rigidly inside your neat little orbit, otherwise known as your comfort zone. Even when your deepest, darkest urge is to burst out of orbit and go down a different path, our subconscious minds can be so covert that it can be incredibly difficult to spot their influence without the gift of a clarifying event to shine a spotlight on it and let you know when it's happening. Here was mine. So I was in graduate school, sitting at my desk, and I was dutifully outlining all this research for a paper that I was writing. And all around me were stacks of journal articles written by some of the most brilliant minds in the field of psychology. And on the outside, I was doing it. I'm getting a Ph.D. Look at me go. But on the inside was a set of untouched, unattempted goals. Things like running a marathon and being honest about my real career aspirations, potentially disappointing my entire doctoral committee. Beginning to speak publicly about topics that I cared about. A long list of untouched, unattempted goals that I was too afraid to even try. I mean, what if I fail? What will people think? How disappointed will they be? People like me don't take risks like that. And then, for a reason that I can't articulate, I remembered my dad. You see, 13 years prior, when I was just 11 years old, my dad died of colon cancer after a grueling 5-year-long treatment battle. My dad's death was my first real face-to-face meeting with mortality and the importance and finality of the time that we have on this planet. My dad's time had run out. And here I was, sitting at my desk with nothing but the gift of time on my side and a list of goals that my mental dark matter had already convinced me that people like me couldn't accomplish. And then a question popped into my mind that exposed my mental dark matter for what it was. It was a set of assumptions that I was treating as facts. And that question was, what would my dad give for the opportunity that I'm wasting right now? And in that moment, I slowed to a stop inside my dutiful little orbit. And I began pushing back in small acts of disobedience at first that grew over time. And like a muscle, I began developing the self-awareness to recognize more and more quickly when I was being limited by my mental dark matter. And I began building the psychological strength to push back when I didn't like the orbit that I was on. So, what about you? What opportunities are you wasting right now? What orbit are you on that's not quite right for you anymore? How is your mental dark matter influencing you? I'll give you an idea as to how to figure it out. The next time you catch yourself saying or thinking things like, people like me can't, or people like me don't, or I could never. The next time you catch yourself saying or thinking something like that, I want you to remember this talk and just indulge me for one moment. Perform the simplest act of disobedience. Stop orbiting for just a second and ask yourself this question. Why not me? Why not me? The thing is, our mental dark matter, our subconscious mind, it sends us thoughts and feelings that are not always helpful and likely aren't true. They create a set of maladaptive, self-policing limitations that lead us to be self-critical, to set goals that are so far below our true potential, and to believe that we deserve less than we really do. And the worst, to live a passive half-life, wasting the beautiful opportunity that we have in front of us. This is why you should care. Listen, the way that we experience life, the majority of it is seen through the lens of our subconscious. But research in the areas of neuroplasticity and growth mindset, positive and clinical psychology, they show us that we can develop the self-awareness to recognize when our mental dark matter is influencing us. And we can build the psychological strength to push back when we don't like the orbit that we're on. We can be more than passive planets rigidly held in orbit inside of our comfort zone. We can take chances. We can push back. And we can chart our own course. Thank you.